It can't be easy coming face to face with the very husband who allegedly tried to kill you by pushing you off a cliff. But that's what Arielle Konig bravely did as she made her first public appearance since the brutal attack. I'm Elizabeth Millner with Law&Crime. Before we jump into this story, let's talk some true crime news and some Law&Crime merch. The Law&Crime Docket is your one-stop shop for trending stories, thrilling body cams, and an exclusive look at brand new shows and podcasts from the faces you love. Sign up for our Docket newsletter by scanning the QR code you see here or click the link in our description and the pinned comment right underneath this video. At the beginning of June, we'll pick 10 new Docket subscribers and we'll send them a Law&Crime hat. Winners will be announced in the newsletter. Okay, now back to this case. As you can see from those images, Arielle Konig donned a headscarf and had a noticeable cut right above her right eye. She didn't say much during that hearing beyond answering the judge's questions. As for her husband, the case is moving pretty quickly as he's set to go on trial for allegedly trying to kill her this summer. Arielle Konig, quite frankly, has been through a lot. Last month, her case made headlines everywhere after her husband allegedly brutally attacked her on a cliff in Hawaii. Now, she appeared in court on Friday, asking the judge to extend her restraining order against her husband.
You signed, you were indicating the information you provided was true and correct to the best of your knowledge. Is that still the case this morning?
Yes.
She filed the petition shortly after the attack, writing to the court, "I am fearful that if Gerhardt is released from custody, he will return to Maui and attempt to harm me or kill me, as well as harm or kill our children or other family members." And while the two on the surface appeared like a picture-perfect couple, nothing is really as it seems, especially according to her account. In her restraining order petition, Arielle alleged her husband had been sexually abusing her for months leading up to the incident, even reportedly noting in her petition the cracks in her marriage really significantly changed back in December. She claims that that's when Gerhardt accused her of having an affair and he was extremely jealous. In her petition, she wrote, since then, he attempted to control and monitor all of her communications. The couple were even going through individual and couples counseling. So fast forward to the couple taking their hike, which by the way was to celebrate Arielle's birthday weekend. She says her husband became enraged when she didn't want to snap a photo with him. She says taking the photo made her uncomfortable because the two were actually so close to the edge of the cliff. Arielle says her husband screamed at her and said something along the lines of, "Go back over there, I'm so effing sick of you." She thought at first he was just kidding, then realized he was being serious. Prosecutors say from there, her husband threw her to the ground, grabbed his medical bag, took out a syringe, tried to inject her with it, but it's unclear what the substance actually was. And she fought for her life. According to Arielle, she grabbed and threw the syringe, and that's when he allegedly picked up a rock and began bashing her head in with it. She said she suffered severe lacerations and even broke her thumb fighting her husband off of her. Who knows what could have happened had the two hikers not showed up on the trail and helped her. Gerhardt fled and was in the wind for hours until police caught him. According to reports, she even learned her husband FaceTimed his son and allegedly told him, "I just tried to kill Ari, but she got away." Arielle's stepson allegedly told her Gerhardt wanted to kill himself after the attack by jumping off a cliff, but that clearly didn't happen. And Gerhardt pleaded not guilty to his charge of attempted second-degree murder.
Good morning, Your Honor. Thomas Sotaki on behalf of Gerhardt Konig, who is appearing by video in custody at OCCC, and I believe he is on the screen.
Okay.
And Your Honor, in this case, we have received a copy of the indictment. We will waive oral reading of it. I reviewed it with Dr. Konig, and we will be entering a plea of not guilty and asking that the matter be set for jury trial.
And has since remained behind bars. As for the temporary restraining order, that remains in effect, so Gerhardt is not allowed anywhere near Arielle or their two children, who are just 4 and 2 years old. Let's bring on now crime victim rights attorney, that's Elizabeth Parker. So from one Elizabeth actually to another, thanks so much for joining me today. Arielle Konig, appeared in court last week to face her husband who allegedly tried to kill her last month. I got to ask before we get into the hearing and everything like that, what's been your reaction to this case overall?
I think the most amazing thing to me is this is a terrific example of how domestic violence can occur in any household. Here we have a highly educated professional. She's a nuclear engineer. She's in a relationship with a doctor, but it just shows you that domestic violence can happen in any walk of life. With any person, anyone can be a victim and be stuck in that victimization and being controlled and traumatized. And she was terrorized by this man that she was living under the same roof with and raising children with.
I want to give a huge thank you to Odoo for sponsoring us. If you don't know Odoo, they're an incredible all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications. They have really cool features like their Projects app. Look, managing projects can be pretty tough, but with Odoo Projects app, it truly doesn't have to be. Need a clear timeline? The Gantt view maps out your tasks and helps you stay on track. Prefer a more flexible approach? The Kanban view lets you move tasks easily from to-do to done. Or if you like a little more structure, the list view gives you all the details at a glance. Plus, Odoo's comprehensive dashboard keeps you updated on task status, activities, and remaining time, so you're always in control. And with powerful reporting tools, you can track your project's budget, milestones, and profitability in real time. So right now, you can get a free 15-day trial of Odoo's all-in-one business solution and see how it can make your life easier. Scan the QR code on your screen or check it out at our link, odoo.com/LCNewsProject. And just kind of looking at the details overall, authorities kind of say the catalyst was Arielle not wanting to take a picture with her husband. But as more details came out, it was revealed that they were standing too close to the edge of the cliff, which she understandably didn't want to do, take a photo so close. But for that to kind of escalate into a vicious attack where he grabbed her hair, he smashed her face, he beat her with a rock, tried poking her with syringes. In terms of, to your point, the escalation, especially of domestic violence cases, do you think that this was planned out all along, or do you think that this was just, and I hate to say a crime of passion, but do you think that's what it was?
I think this was 100% premeditated. I think, that it was not just a crime of opportunity. This was a planned getaway weekend for her birthday. He wants to suggests to take her on this scenic hike that lots of people go on. What a great opportunity for her to slip off of the side of the cliff when they're taking this photograph. And then it looks like it's just an accident. We see things like this happen all of the time. But let's try to think about the fact of that he had 2 syringes. This is an anesthesiologist who has access to lethal medications. He's got 2 separate syringes of lethal medications with him, or, well, we don't know what type of medication, but medication with him in a syringe that he tries to use against her. That's not consistent. Then he flees the scene after 2 hikers try to help her, and she says he's trying to kill me. That's consistent with somebody that has consciousness of guilt, somebody that planned this crime and didn't want to get caught. And then we know, admits to his son on a FaceTime call that he just had tried to kill her. If that doesn't scream premeditated murder or attempted premeditated murder, I don't know what does. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if the prosecutors maybe do try to bring in some of that evidence to show it was premeditated.
Yeah, because to your point, that was kind of my thought when the case was first unfolding. Why does someone bring their medical bag with them on a hike? For the most part, people just bring a backpack, water, maybe a protein bar, something like that. But to bring your medical bag, where from what we've been seeing, it didn't seem like he was going to work afterwards anyway. So that was kind of a little suspicious to me as well, too. And Gerhardt Konig pleaded not guilty, despite him, calling up his son, even kind of allegedly admitting to the attack as well, too. Are you surprised this case is going to go on trial, especially as the defense wants a jury trial?
I mean, I think at this point, because we're so early on in the case, that's the choice that they do have to make. I did think that the defense is a little bit difficult. What it was interesting to hear people that knew the Konigs interviewed, and especially who knew Gerhardt, saying that he's a nice, normal, down-to-earth guy, that it makes me wonder if psychologically was something going on. None of this sounds like a person I knew. That was someone who was in medical school with him. So, you kind of wonder if this is a situation where he just snapped, and, the defense is trying to explore all of their avenues. They did tell the judge at the last hearing that they would be filing a motion for bond, that since he's being held no bond and he has no criminal history, that they would be asking the court to be more consistent with other rulings of attempted second degree murder that have occurred in the same jurisdiction. So I thought that was interesting. But really, you're stuck in a case like this with either saying that she's made everything up, she's the one that attacked him and this happened in self-defense. I mean, that's really, I think, all that you're stuck with, or that there's some sort of psychological break and he didn't know what he was doing. But from what I've seen of the videos of him in court, that doesn't seem to be. He seems to be of pretty sound mind. And today, or the most recent hearing, in the injunction case or the restraining order case, the judge even spoke to him and he spoke back and seemed to understand the nature of the proceedings and everything that was going on. So that may be a difficult defense to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of speaking of the restraining order, in Arielle's petition for the restraining order, she kind of cited her marriage issues started back in December when her husband accused her of having an affair. She even said that her husband was extremely jealous. What do you just make of the issues that they had even prior to the attack that happened last month?
It seemed to be there was an escalation in violence, from what she was saying. And again, it just goes to show that this can happen in any marriage. This can happen in any relationship. But she talked about how he had tried to control her and monitor her communications as the extreme jealousy on his part escalated, accusing her of having an affair. She cited in her petition sexual abuse and sexual assault, which is really kind of scary and a very much a power and control tactic used by domestic abusers. That's something that they oftentimes will use. But as a victim here, we have to think about, well, why didn't she try to get away earlier? Why did she go on this trip with him? And when you're a victim of domestic violence, a lot of times you're just doing everything you can to minimize the situation, to keep the other person happy, to keep them calm. She most likely had damaged self-worth, because of this mistreatment by him, or alleged mistreatment, distorted thoughts of being controlled and traumatized. That leads to confusion, to doubts, oftentimes to self-blame. I'm assuming was in a significant amount of fear, because she talks about in her petition for injunction or restraining order that she was in fear. And in fact, she became very uneasy on this hike in terms of where they were going and what he wanted them to be doing. And then we can't forget they had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, little children that she feels a great deal of responsibility for. Obviously, she wants to protect them. She doesn't want the beatings to be turned, I'm sure, on them and the abuse to happen to them. So she's afraid of what would happen to her children. So she's trying to just kind of keep it all together. It sounds like they'd been in couple counseling, but she's got a tough road ahead of her. But what I thought was extremely powerful was the video of her in court at the temporary restraining order hearing where the judge granted an extension. It sends a clear message. She's empowered at this point now. She's taking control of her life. She's taking her life back. She's protecting herself. She's protecting her children, and she's determined to get justice and the justice she deserves, however that looks like. And she's standing up for herself, and that was great to see.
Yeah, and I commend her bravery as well, too, because especially as this case kind of made headlines pretty much nationwide, her name is out there, what had happened to her is out there. And, I just kind of do commend, not even kind of, I do commend her bravery for being able to essentially face her husband after everything that happened. Now, with this case planning to go on trial and with the restraining order in effect, how will that kind of work? Will Arielle even be able to testify with her husband still in the courtroom? How could that work with a restraining order in effect?
Typically, there's an exception made in court because there's a requirement and a constitutional right for him to physically face his accuser. So if she's going to be testifying, and we know she'll have to testify in the criminal case, even if there is a restraining order in place that prevents that from happening in a courtroom, there's an exclusion or there's an exception to that restraining order being in place, with all the court personnel there, their lawyers present. But there is an absolute right for him to confront his accuser and to do that in person.
And I, still kind of imagining what was going on in her mind. I can't even fathom what it's like kind of going face to face with her husband, whether it be virtually, whether it be face to face again in court. But what has been your experience in talking with victims of similar crimes?
That's the hardest part. And I think why it was so important for me to see her in court. And, she had a scarf on, and you could see she still had stitches remaining from this incident. Facing the accuser, that step of walking into the courtroom for the very first time is the scariest time, I think, for these victims. And so many of them in domestic violence cases, we see they cannot do that. They don't want to do that. They don't have the strength to be able to step forward and step across that threshold and say, this is what happened to me, and I want the justice that I deserve. So it's a very difficult thing to do in domestic violence cases, which is why so oftentimes the victims recant, the victims don't cooperate, and the prosecutors have to drop charges. So I think she's sending a very clear message that I'm not going away and I'm taking my life back by getting this restraining order, taking these steps in the event that he does get bond in the future, that a judge does grant him bond. That she has these protections for herself, for her family, for her children, and also for their dog. I thought that was an interesting thing that I had not ever seen in a restraining order before, that the dog is also included, that he's not allowed to have any contact.
Wow. Have actually no words because, like, to your point, I've never seen that before as well. And, I picture in my mind, if I were to be a juror, if I were to see Arielle walk inside that courtroom, take the witness stand, and then I see Dr. Konig there at the defense table, to me, it'd be hard not to unsee just some of the injuries that she's faced. When you're having to deal with thinking of getting hit over the head with a rock multiple times to the point she could have died during this whole thing. I always think back to whether or not, had those hikers not come and seen what was going on, and had they not stepped in to help, what really could have happened. But I'm really just kind of surprised as well, too. And again, we're kind of early-ish into what's going on with the criminal proceedings and everything like that. But I'm kind of surprised a little bit, just to kind of save face, to not re-traumatize Arielle, that the defense just wouldn't go for a plea deal to avoid a trial altogether. But it does seem like they would prefer it to move forward, kind of declaring that this is all a misunderstanding type of thing.
That's going to remain to be seen. But I thought it was interesting that the defense is asking for a continuance, and I think in the injunction he's referred to as like a respondent and not a defendant, because it's a quasi civil hearing or proceeding. But they were asking for a continuance in the case, and not just agreeing. I think the judge asked, do you want to agree to the extension? Do you want to agree to the injunction? And they wouldn't agree to the injunction even. So I think what likely is happening is that they want an opportunity to hear Arielle testify in the injunction hearing, to have her take the stand and tell her story. And it's kind of a preview of what the evidence is in the case and what they expect the criminal case will be. And they'll see how good she is at testifying, at articulating. Is she going to break down? Is she easily rattled? Things like that. So I think oftentimes the injunctions are agreed to, and I think here this is kind of an opportunity for the defense to have a preview of the evidence, and it may be smart. It may work for them in this particular case.
And do you think, when it comes to the criminal matter, that any part of you thinks that the defense could actually win, as far as possibly just finding him not guilty or possibly acquitting him of the charges?
I think it's really going to come down to the testimony of those two hikers. You're going to have independent testimony, independent eyewitnesses that don't know either of these parties coming in. From what we understand, their evidence or their testimony is going to be is that they hear the screams, they come upon him, and he's bashing her head in with a rock. Now, I think that's going to be very difficult to overcome that this was in self-defense, that she had, attacked him, that there's some sort of misunderstanding, based upon what they've said, what we understand their testimony to be. I think that's going to be a very difficult issue for the defense to overcome in any way, in any defense. I just don't see it. So I think they're going to have a difficult time, but he's facing life in prison, so they may not have an option. They may just have to go to trial if there's no plea offer or there's nothing less than what he's facing.
Yeah, and that steep punishment, I'm sure he has a lot to think about while he still remains inside of jail for the time being. Elizabeth Parker, I want to thank you so much for your time and your insight. Before we sign you off, though, is there anything else about this case you would like to add?
No, just thank you very much for having me to be able to talk about this and to be able to show how domestic violence can touch so many different lives, and can, it doesn't matter the race, it doesn't matter the religion, it doesn't matter the socioeconomic class, that it can affect all of us, and that it's really important for us to be hypervigilant and for us to pay attention to what's going on in others' lives, that we may be the hikers, so to speak, that came along and saved Arielle. I just caution everyone to pay attention and to you never know who in your life may be a victim.
Absolutely. Again, Elizabeth Parker, thank you so much for your insight into this case. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
As far as the criminal case goes, though, Dr. Gerhardt Konig has another court hearing next month, but his trial is slated to begin the following month in June. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.